Welcome to our February GBTA Georgia chapter meeting. Appreciate your attendance and time out today to join our call. We are excited to have Maria Chevalier with us today to speak on her topic for today is get in and stay in with the C-suite using data to better engage stakeholders. So I'm sure you're just as excited as I am to hear Maria's presentation. Before we get to that, we'll run through a few housekeeping items and a couple of updates, and then we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. As far as updates go, first of all, let me thank our sponsor for today's meeting. Southern Company is our sponsor for today. We thank them very much. There is no formal presentation from Southern Company, but I did want to go ahead and make sure that we acknowledge their sponsorship and acknowledge the fact that we're appreciative of their sponsorship and their partnership. As far as the flow of the meeting itself, if you have questions for Maria, please use the chat feature. Cindy Mann is going to manage the chat box for us, and will facilitate the Q&A at the end of Maria's presentation. As far as chapter updates, if you have not had a chance to see the message that was pushed out this week, I just want to give you a couple of high-level snippets of where we are this year, or where we're going this year, we hope to go. We had our February board meeting this week. I think I can comfortably say that June will be our first in-person meeting. And we're looking to do that as more of a mix and mingle, more of a social affair than a typical chapter meeting. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to meet people. I'm ready to get up in people's faces and you know, be what we used to be prior to COVID, or be where we were prior to COVID. So I'm excited about that. Look for details to come within the next, I would say, the next couple of weeks, or the next 2 to 3 weeks. You'll see an update or as part of my next chapter president's message. I also want to touch on Education Day for a second, which we normally have in May. It was super successful, even virtually, last year in September, so we're going to keep it in September again this year. It may be changed up a little bit. I know Kim has got big plans for our Education Day / Education Month this year. Our chapter auction will also, which was moved from October to December in 2020, will be in December again this year. We're excited about that. Sponsorships. Speaking for Rick, our sponsorship director, Rick George, we're extremely thankful and grateful for the sponsorships that we've been able to get so far, but obviously we would love to have more sponsorship dollars coming in. So whatever you can afford to do, or whatever opportunity you can provide to the chapter, that would be greatly appreciated. And with that, and I know I probably stole a little bit of your thunder, Heather, but I'm going to turn it over to Heather Pastrick. Heather, serving as our past president this year, is working with our chapter VP, Will Begnard, on our auction. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll go into the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you, Dwight. And thanks so many of you. I think we've got 43 people on the call, which is amazing. And I know, obviously I've done the auction. It feels like that's a rash that comes back every year. But last year we did over $10,000, which is amazing on a pandemic year when there's so many of us that are reeling. So I just want to first and foremost thank you for your generosity. And as we go into this next year, and Will is off today, so I told him I'd speak and harass you guys for him. But here's my thought. So instead of waiting until the fall, which is what, you know, if you could see Donna Murley's face, she would tell you that we always wait until like September, and then we're like having a mad grab for items. Is you guys think about how do we make, you know, Georgia BTA continue to last and continue to be able to fund great programs and great speakers. One of the things that I was thinking is you guys walk in and out. We all do. We all walk in and out of places every day. I happen to walk in and out of the same Mexican joint. It seems like once a week. So I would carry around these auction letters and I would just ask people that I do business with, hey, I sit on the board or I'm part of an organization and we're a nonprofit. And would you guys be willing to donate $50, a gift card or whatever the item is? And if we all did that collectively, the 43 people that we have on this phone for the next, I don't know, 3 months, whether that's an item, whether that's, a gift card, whatever, that would be over 120 items. So I am going to throw a challenge out there. So we're going to, as Maria would say, gamification, right? We're going to see if we can gamify this. Okay. So Will told me that one of our lovely individuals is a master at putting this on social media. So I am going to challenge, by the end of Monday, can we get 10 items in? Right? So what we're looking for is a picture of you and your item. So I will say I got this Hulk item, which is not going to be part of the donation, right? I take a picture, check, 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 right? And this is my auction item, and I would like you to text it or email it to myself or Will, and we're going to get it up on the website. So we're going to start talking about the auction now. Well before December. We understand that it's a long way away, but if we don't start now, we're going to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to December. So I'm hoping by a show of hands, right? If we could just raise our hands or raise the roof in your pictures, right? Dwight's hands are up. I'm waiting for hands to get up. Lori, where are your hands? I'm looking for your hands. Ellen, get your hands up. Donna, get your hands up. Bruce, get your hands up. Debbie, get your hands up. Yeah, there you go. Susan Thomas has got her hands up. Some of you guys are on total video shutdown. So I'm going to virtually think that your hands are up and committed to this. So I look forward to the 10 pictures. We are going to have an amazing auction, whether it's virtual, whether it's live in person, but I just wanted to, it's only going to happen if we all do this together. So I appreciate you guys all pulling your hands up, and I will kick it back to you, Dwight.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, you never disappoint. Thank you so much for that. And with that, we will get ready to roll into our speaker presentation. As I mentioned before, we have Maria, God, I can't speak today to save my life. Maria Chevalier with us. Maria has 30 years of executive experience in the travel industry within all aspects of the travel ecosystem: Hilton Worldwide, Travelport, BCD Travel, and the Travel Desk. She has a wealth of experience as a business travel buyer, serving as Global Director of Travel and Meeting Services for Johnson & Johnson and HP, both programs with an annual T&E spend of over $1 billion. As the BTN Group's 2010 Business Travel Manager of the Year, Maria has always been ahead of her time in adoption of data and analytics tools to improve travel programs and the customer experience. In her spare time, Maria leads CTME, Search Party, a group of corporate travel, meetings, and events professionals working to support industry peers in the pursuit of career growth. Maria's proven ability in creating commercial success, along with a deep understanding of the challenges the business travel buyer faces in today's market, make her uniquely qualified to address the needs of the traveler and the C-suite. After today's presentation, Maria is happy to answer questions concerning the topic and questions related to the career searches and changes. And with that, I will turn it over to Maria Chevalier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. So I will be the first to go out there after these wonderful speeches. One of my hobbies is jewelry making. So I will give up a gift for your event that I will personally do a custom necklace and earrings to go for auction.
Those are my virtual hands, but they're real. Woo-hoo! Love it.
Yes. And Kim Kearns will tell you that, these will not be ones made out of fake stones. They're very well done. I will say that, and I will certainly send you a sample one that you can put in the picture, but it will be one custom made for whoever buys it. Okay.
I'm bidding on it. I can tell you that. I still sport some wonderful pieces that Maria has made for me. So that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome. So anyway, let me, now I'm having a problem with this. Oh, there we go. So, okay. Anyway, thank you so much for everybody's time today. This is meant to be, I always say, your presentation, not mine. So you guys, I'm good if you interrupt, derail, we go a different direction. Jump in at any time. I know you've got the chat function, but I'm good being disrupted and going down a path and more into one subject area than another, because I want to make sure you get what you need out of this. So, I put together agenda, telling some topics that I think are important in this discussion. But again, this is your meeting, not mine. So I cannot know how it's doing this. Let me try here. Okay. So, COVID's been tough. It really has. It's been tough on all of us. And I think at the end of this, we're all going to be doing, I call them our peaches and pits, highlights and lowlights of, what came out of COVID. But if there is one positive of COVID, it's that we got the attention of the C-suite. Okay, we did. And I think that when you talk about the kind of the challenge, the journey of this particular COVID, we started off with crisis management, and it was that ever-changing evolution of COVID. It was the impact to the travelers. It was, where are they? Where have they been and where are they going? And managing through the crisis months of this. The next phase of this was certainly the asset management, because there were so much assets out there due to canceled, meetings, tickets, hotels. You guys know it. You lived it every day, but it was significant. Nowhere in a history did we have this much assets at risk that had to be managed to it. And what we are in now is that recovery management phase of this. So we went through this, and I think what I saw was the C-suite, instead of in that kind of mid-market, occasionally, interacting with travel organizations, they were frequently interacting. They got a seat at the table. I also saw an expansion, into other organizations, into that, but got their attention. The other good thing is it really did show the value of travel management and travel managers. I always say that we make things look too easy as travel managers. And the analogy I always like to use is, how when you go to a restaurant and you just order this meal, remember that restaurant where you used to go in, sit down, people would be in there, is that you go to a restaurant, you order this amazing meal, and at no point do you think about the complexities of what it took for that meal to arrive on your plate. You don't think about the herb that came out from India, the carrot that came out of a farmer's, garden, all the things it took to get that plate served so perfectly. That's what we do as travel manager. We don't explain all the complexities of distribution and content and all these other things that happen. We don't. But guess what happens? So when COVID hit, the complexities surfaced. All the things that we make look easy, it came to the surface, and it came with a flood. So what happened was the C-suite got a glimpse into the complexity to it. So in addition to that, COVID added to what was already a complex business and added to it. So they started to understand the additional complexities. And as we talked about, not only did all of a sudden we get all this great exposure to the C-suite, but so were other departments. Were more engaged in travel than ever before. And at a time with unprecedented pace of change. I mean, it was changing by the minute and very difficult of which to keep up with. Okay. So now what? Okay. You got in the door, you've got their attention. How do you keep it? How do you maintain that? So kind of let's talk about that. So first of all, I want to say, well, why is that important? Why are all those C's important, to it? Why do we care? Why do we need to maintain that? Why can I just do my job and not have to do that? Well, first of all, it is going to, at the end of the day, make your job easier, because there's always, I mentioned to you that two-way learning. They get to learn about travel and understand how you've just made everything so much easier and simpler for them. And you're going to gain insights from them, and better insights to help you set better strategy and better support. It's going to make for much better decision-making, because when that request makes it up the chain, it's more likely to be approved, because now they understand it. They understand more than ever before the need for this, that they historically didn't have that level of understanding. The other is it really does save time and money because, again, those decisions will be made faster and more efficiently. It will build trust like you've never seen. Your brand, and don't underestimate your brand as a travel organization and what that will do to build credibility to that organization. And it will help in policymaking. It will help in the kind of them understanding the investment in T&E, and it will continue to advocate for support when you need it, and help you with the challenges that you're facing. Okay, I want to talk for a minute about the C-suite and their personalities. Okay, because they've got some personalities. Okay, if you make it to being a CEO, you're going to be a driver. All right. So if you're not familiar with any of these personality types, I really do suggest, especially before you get in front of them, that you do get very comfortable with it, because you'll understand better how to communicate with them, how to understand how they think, what they'll do. So, on there, so better understand the CEO versus the CFO versus the CIO, versus even the chief people officer of sorts. It's very important that you do understand this. Also, when you're exposed to the entire C-suite at one time, you're going to typically have 3 of those personalities in there, sometimes 4. But, and it's so you've got to understand how to manage and balance those personalities. So at one time in my career, I was presenting to the C-suite on a topic, and it was a good life lessons of kind of what not to do, you guys. But I had one of the executives who was definitely a driver, who was, every time I would present a slide, he would get it, be in the clouds, and he'd be doing this to me. Next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide. Then, ironically, another executive who happened to be the CEO, who was untypical of most CEOs, but was very granular. And he kept going, every time I'd advance one, he'd go back 10 slides, go back 10 slides. So it's hard to balance it when you get exposure to those. So you have to figure out a way of which to balance those that are impatient and want to hurry up and get to the next slide, the next slide, the next slide, to those that are going to get granular. And sometimes when you've got the conflicting personalities both in there, which is very common, it's not unusual to say, why don't we do an off meeting, an additional meeting to get into the weeds to make sure we can get through what we need to in the clouds here. But you've got to be prepared for all of those different personalities, balancing them out. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But be prepared, especially when you have your one-on-ones, be prepared on their style and what they're going to look for and the words that resonate with them. If you've got a driver, you've got to get to your point quickly. Don't ramble, don't socialize, don't do anything like that at all. Analyticals are going to want to know the numbers. You better know every single number that there is. But bottom line is, make sure you understand that. Okay, let's talk about getting it right. I've been in situations where a number is wrong. And so at that point, they discount everything you're presenting. Okay, it happens. So you have to make sure that when you go in there, that you get it right. Okay, you've got to spend a lot of times making sure those numbers are right, the facts are right. If you are not 100% sure, don't put it in there. Okay, don't. It is critical to have accurate data. Okay, and we are in the most difficult category of which to accomplish that because of the fragmentation of the data that we deal with every single day and the inconsistency from data source to data source to data source. You're trying to tell a story and every data source tells you a different story. So what's the one that you use? Okay, so it's frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody out there. So literally your organization can lose credibility if you don't go there with the right numbers, with the right story in order to tell. So make sure that you're investing correctly in data that is accurate and that you can go forward with and not let that department lose credibility over that. All right. Now I want to pause for 1 second. Any questions before I continue? Okay, I'm not hearing any.
Maria, there are none in the chat box at this
Okay,
time.
thank you. The one thing I do want to strongly recommend is, as the head of travel, you always need to be prepared to talk at any time, because you never, ever, ever know when you're going to run into an executive. You don't. So at all points, I would always tell my teams, we have to make sure we've got our elevator speech of what's going on in travel. Okay. So if you run into your boss's boss, or you run into the CEO, you run into the head of HR, whatever the case may be, you need to have your elevator speech. It's the story of travel. Okay. Now, first of all, as an elevator speech implies, it needs to be short, needs to be sweet, needs to be to the point. So examples of that is, let's take in a normal world, and we'll talk COVID. In a normal world, we can say, T&E is running about 3 points above budget, 5 points above prior year. It's being driven predominantly by travel pattern changes, and a little bit by behavioral, but we're working on the behavioral ones and trying to adjust everything else based on what's going on in the travel pattern changes. Okay, elevator speech. Tell me the story of travel. They're always going to know top lines of what's occurring. Why is it occurring? What are your priorities around it? And what are you going to do? Now, you got to make sure, don't use jargon, because they're not going to know our jargon that we speak on a regular basis. And you guys all know it. It's when I'm talking to family and friends, they're like, I have no idea what you just said, Maria. So make sure that you remove from your elevator speech that it's any of the typical jargon that we use. But the other thing is, make sure that everybody in your department is singing from that same elevator speech. Okay, because it's important that it is consistent out there, because again, it can lose credibility if one person is saying one thing and another is saying something else. But elevator speech, what's going on? Okay. And this one, you guys get it. There's so many metrics out there and so many different ways to measure them and all of that. It really does depend on, and you guys get this, depends on, the priorities. It depends on if you get a new head of procurement, a new head of finance, they all switch on a dime. So they do vary, but these are some of the basics of, what people report on from a high level and things that you got to make sure that you're on. Interestingly enough, what I'm seeing a lot of now is, now that kind of COVID is the reality of sorts, and sustainability, where it used to be, how can we reduce it? It's like, now that we've dropped down to zero, how do we manage it better? So I'm seeing sustainability come back stronger than ever before from companies and even just generally out there, what I'm seeing out in the media. But I'd pay attention to that. And of course, traveler satisfaction is certainly evolving in what that looks like, what that means from a policy perspective, because it now has more of a safety element than ever before. And how do you balance all of that out? But these are just some of the things to consider and look at. Okay. All right. So often people will share all the what's, okay? Average ticket price has gone up, T&E is up, it's all of the what's, and with the C-suite, more than anyone else, they're going to want not the data dump of all the what's and the dashboards that reiterate too much of the what. They need to know the why. Why is it happening? And why is important, because why leads to action, and the C-suite want action every time. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So have any of you ever eaten at the Varsity when you could actually go into a restaurant? And I always think of this when I go in, because if you've been in there, go, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have? What do you have? I feel like that's what it is like when I go into the C-suite, that same level of pace. And it's like, okay, I got to think that quick on there. So why are things that you can impact? Behavioral. behavior, or, all the different aspects of the behavior that influence what happens with T&E. Anything that you've done contractually that impacts it and can. Inflation impact, deflation, travel patterns, demand, currency. These are all things that impact those. These are the whys. Why did it happen? And then which of those can you influence? You can't change inflation and you can't change currency. And you have to remind them that demand is in the hands of the business, as is the budget. And travel pattern changes are very important to continue to watch and to monitor, because I will tell you this, while at HP, it made or broke me one year by $10 million. You gain a client, you lose a client. You buy a company, you sell a company. Travel patterns are the realities of it. But if your travel pattern shifted from New York City to, Birmingham, Alabama, guess what? That can have a positive impact, but it can flip on a dime to have a negative impact. And those are things that you have to be able to talk to, explain, and then what are you going to do about it? Okay. So what are your actions based on the whys of what's occurring here? And they want to understand this. And again, quickly, top line, how much of it was behavioral? How was that in comparison to the trends of the past? And what does that mean? Okay. So they want to know quickly and want to be able to do that. Okay. As I mentioned, C-suite need action. They want to know, what are you going to do about it? Okay. So go in there prepared. What are the things that you're working on? How are you going to change that trend? How are you going to impact it? What's your time? What's the risk to that? What are all the complexities around that? Is the likelihood it's going to get done in what time frame in that budget year? Is it going to be beyond that? They need to know exactly how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. So you have to be prepared to say that, and say that again within that 30 seconds. Here are the top 3 things we're doing that are going to change X% of it. It'll put us back on budget within, the next 4 months, which will keep us on track, and within the context of that include, I call them BBTs, the bad boys of travel. So talk about who are the bad boys of travel, which are the ones, and how much you're going to do. Back to the point earlier, add a little gamification of which departments or divisions are doing well, which ones aren't, and what you're doing to work with those that are underperforming in order to make sure that ultimately those actions are put into place. So one example too is when I was at Johnson & Johnson, I talked to them about tearing down, which of course, was always a 4-letter word. I'm not tearing down. I said, but what if you did it in one-night stays? And so the way that I convinced them in an action that I did is I said, if you, the C-suite, do it first, the rest will follow. Okay. So one of my asks going in was, you do it and then watch it do it, because do you really get the benefit once you've done it, when you're just there for one night? And I would get literally pictures from people seeing the C-suite in a lower tier hotel. Again, action, including them to help with what netted out to be the necessary action. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just you guys live this every day, so you get the understanding of this. Is there's deep data and wide data on there, as to helping you in the measurement of your KPIs and using these in the KPIs on there, and knowing when to choose what source if you're in fact not using a data aggregator. Okay, just one quick, any questions so far?
There are no questions in the chat box just yet.
All right, thank you. So I love the art of storytelling. I do. And in particular, people forget it with data. They tend to just recite everything, and they lose that art in there in presenting all the facts. And studies show time and time again that if you want somebody to remember something, tell them a story with it, because not only do you get the relatability and all the other things that you need and that increase understanding, but people connect to that. They'll connect to a story, and the retention rates are significantly higher in the case of a story. than it is when you just present a dashboard. So when you're looking at this, when you're talking to C-suite, if you want them to remember something, if you want them to connect to something, if you want them to do this, then add a story to it, humanize it, bring something more than just the dashboard to it, and you'll see how much more they're going to connect than ever before. It really is a great gift to learn of how to connect the two, especially, sometimes that data component is boring. Humanize it. Talk about a traveler. Talk about something of why it's changing the way it is. Connect them. Okay, so this is kind of this typical path of improved stakeholder. So it's important to leverage not just the C-suite, but those who influence the C-suite, those that connect with them. So make sure you know who all these stakeholders are. No matter how large it is. I used to laugh at HP because there were 350,000 employees, and by the way, I used to laugh with my peers, and I know you guys get this every day. I said, I didn't need auditors. I had 350,000 of them because every day they told me how to do my job, where the other categories didn't have to face that, on there, nothing but experts. Make sure that you do have some sort of stakeholder alignment plan. You're going to have to divide and conquer this in companies with yourself and with your organization in order to, do that kind of web of connection. Because when you go in to present to the C-suite, if you've gone to the stakeholders that influence it, they're going to hear about it and know about it before you get in that door, which makes your job a lot easier. Get a plan that maps them up to them, get alignment with them before you walk in the door. Typically, whenever I go to present, when the CEO is involved, before I get to the CEO, I've already met one-on-one with the CFO, the CIO, whoever's on that board. I've met with everyone in advance except for the CEO. So I already know going in there, I have alignment from all of them. So think about how to do that. Also think about that communication strategy with them. How do you connect with them on a regular basis? Especially during COVID. It's challenging during COVID to connect. I am so tired of Zoom, as everybody is. But think about, what is the frequency that you need to communicate with these people? What is the best way of which to do that? You guys get the difference. Millennials, it's short and sweet and frequent, on there. What is the best way of which to accomplish that? And how do you do that? And the one thing that I always do before I meet with an executive is I get their latest copies of any presentations they've done. So I will match it stylistically. I'll match the words they use. I'll match the way that they kind of approach the entire deck. I try to make it literally the mirror image, because that way they'll relate to it. They relate to it better because it's their style. It's their way of communicating. It's the words that they use. I get down to that level to make sure that there's as close of a match as I can get, And of course, everybody knows that I'm going to keep talking about data, because data is what I love. Make sure that data is your guide. Make sure you have a story, and make sure that there's actions there. But this is the path. But the reason I put this slide up is I want you to make sure that beyond the C-suite, you make sure that you engage with all the other ones that influence that have part in that, especially now in COVID, where they're actually much more accessible than before. And I actually want to talk about it much more than they ever have before. Make sure you leverage that and you keep and maintain that. Okay. And of course, and this is too, mapping out your stakeholders. Make sure you have those, that are high influence, low interest, high influence, high interest. You know who those are. And each of these quadrants, I won't read them to you, but you get it. The level of influence they have, the level of interest they have. Make sure that you are balancing out these and you prioritize them accordingly. As you can imagine, high influence, high interest. Okay. You want to make sure you're partnering and you're collaborating with those, but also don't leave out that high influence, low interest, because you're going to have to change them into being high interest. Okay. All right, let's do kind of do's and don'ts. So I always like do's and don'ts of sorts, because I used to be obsessed with that TV show on TLC, What Not to Wear. And the only reason I was obsessed is I was afraid somebody would nominate me for what not to wear because I keep dressing so bad. So I was like, this is what to wear or what not to wear. Okay, these are the things. So let's talk about the do's. Make sure you thread when you're talking to the C-suite, your priorities and how they thread back into the priorities of the company. Connect to the company. So even a goal. So one example of this is when I was at HP, I had one of the executives come out and say, our hold times were too long. Well, you need to do something. And I said, well, and so what I did is I presented to that executive a benchmarking study of what our, SLA, our results were in comparison to this benchmarking group, and went through all of it and say, we're much better and this is this. And he goes, well, who are you benchmarking against? I said, our own HP call center, how we respond to our own customers. So I benchmarked to ourselves. So I threaded it and I made them relate better to how our goals were established and why they were. And the other thing is threading that goal back into, I can change that and we can answer it sooner. And here's the cost back to the company. So are you willing to budget the additional $10 million it's going to cost me to switch that dial? So relate it, thread it. Always, always, always be open and transparent. Always. Don't ever go in there without being absolutely, completely transparent on things. As we've talked about before, build those relationships, build your champions, build those that when you get in there, you've already got the right levels of support. Look, and I'm all about having stretch and trying to push yourself and innovate, but make sure that they're realistic. Because if you don't and you lose credibility there, it will hurt you down the road. Try to establish common ground. How do you connect to them? How do you thread to them? What do you have in common? Whether it's the goals that they're facing or the challenges they're facing, or even on a personal level, both have a dog, whatever the case may be, connect, find that ground. The other is know your numbers. Don't go in there if you don't know those numbers. And if you don't know them inside and out, don't do it on there. Prepare. Make sure that you're able to support what those are. Know their presentation styles. Everybody presents differently. Watch their videos of how they presented. Pick up clues from their style in watching what they've done, because they're very accessible, out there. And the other thing is when you're presenting to a group, like you're presenting to the board, you need to engage everyone, eye contact with everyone in that meeting, everyone that C-suite. At some point, you need to be eye contact with them, engage them, ask them a question, bring them into the conversation. And engage them is also about asking a question of them to bring them into the conversation and not just present at them, but engage them. The don'ts, the what not to wear, okay? Don't spring surprises there. Don't ever do that. That's a kiss of death right there. And don't ever agree to a deliverable that cannot be met. Don't set yourself up for that kind of failure. Now, and it's not uncommon, you get nervous to ramble. Try to find some way of which to catch yourself on that. Because remember, that is the group that is typically in that driver's seat, and they're very impatient. So you got to get to the point and get to the point quickly. Be careful, especially in the ramble. If they ask you a question that's close-ended, answer it close-ended. Don't ramble with it. Answer it, pause, see if they need more information, then move on from there. But answer it and move on, okay? Do not also be afraid to say, I don't know, on there, because there are times you're not going to know everything. I've been in the case and say, well, I noticed that Chicago, like the rates are really high now and this, and this. Well, let me research that and get back to you. It's okay to not know everything. You can't, but it's better to say that and say, hold on, I'm going to put that as an action item to get back to you. I'll get back to you by the end of business. Than it is to give them an answer that's not true. All right. Manage your time, manage your time, manage your time. I can't tell you how often people don't manage their time correctly, of which I keep looking at things going, I hope I'm doing that, even though I'm lecturing you guys on it, because I do tend to ramble and do all the things, what not to do. So manage your time, rehearse it. And you guys, when I start with a deck, I sit there and I will say, this is a 30-second slide because it's not that important. It's just the beginning, or this is really important. So this is my 5-minute slide, you know, and time it out. Say, okay, that's my 30-second, boom, move on, boom, move on, move on. And do start with the expectation that they all know how to read. Okay. So you don't have to read everything on it. So, but make sure that you manage the time. And the last don't is, and I see this so often, somebody will skip over an objection. They won't do it. They leave them hanging out there, which is not a good thing to do. You've got to make sure that you bring that up, even if you have to address it later, and say, okay, I understand why you're objecting to this program I want to put in place, or this policy I want to put in place on there. Don't leave it unsaid. Even if you have to get back to them, never, ever, ever leave that on the table. Okay, we're actually at the question time on there. And I also, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, would certainly leave it open not only to this, but as I mentioned, I started a group many, many years ago. It's a career search group to help those that have been displaced or, you know, or is in the midst of a career search. And we've helped thousands of people there. So certainly feel free to ask me questions on, you know, what we've talked about today, or questions about that, whichever you prefer. So I don't know if you open the mic or.
So at this time, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, you're more than welcome to do so. And while somebody does do that, I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
Marie, so your slide on at telling a story and then the do's and don'ts. When I was thinking about that, I wanted to know, is there any specific word choices that you would suggest to use and to not use?
It's a great question. That's where I study the person. I do. I look and say, read their memos, read their decks, watch their decks. What words do they use? You know, and I literally will emulate their words. I look for them and say, okay, these are the action words they use. These are the words they use to describe different things. And I copy it because it's obviously their language. It comes down to, you know, you talk differently to, you know, a 5-year-old than you talk to a 50-year-old. You talk differently to somebody who's in New Jersey versus somebody who's in Atlanta. Words matter. And so I do emulate their style, and I study it before I go to present to somebody like that. So I think it's as much learning those as it is the brief nature of it. You've got to be brief with a CEO. You've got to. And yeah.
Thank you. You are more than welcome, attendees, to take yourself off of mute and ask a question of Maria. The chat box has actually been quiet. They've been paying a lot of attention to you, Maria.
That's good. No questions? Come on.
We usually have lots of questions.
Usually, yeah. I will say I liked your tidbit about using looking at who you're talking to, their previous PowerPoint presentation, and emulating that. That was a very good trick.
Yeah, it's helped me so often in my career because you look at their style of how they present, and it really does make a difference because they'll automatically, it just makes them comfortable, you know, and it's obviously he's chosen it for a reason on there. And in particular, just look for, I print them and I highlight the words that I see repeated and how they present the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know.
Understood. Christine, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I thought, when you're talking about presenting to executives, one of the things that I kind of learned was keep your bullet points 6 to 8 words. Don't put too much content because, as you said, they can read. So what you want to do is talk to your bullet points. Do you have any rules for that?
Yeah, I'd say it still goes back to the style. Because let's take, the head of human resource. Okay. They're much nicer human beings than, me. So, so they tend to use more words as they present, because they're much more expressive amiables by nature. So I tend to do more, and, on there, and my slides are more colorful. My slides are much more robust in my words and much more flowery than I am when I'm talking to a CFO. With a CFO, I don't have a lot of color in there and I use a lot less words. I do laugh sometimes when I'm laughing because, I'm working for this British company now. And I always said, are you paid by the word? Like I'll look at a slide, go, you can take out like 2/3 of that. So, I learned a great trick, speaking of this, and from Kurt Eckert, when I worked for him, and he taught me this trick, and he said, the header of your slide shouldn't be the subject, but the message, because it's what people see first is the header. So I use that so much now with C-suite presentations, is making the header my message and not my subject. But on the bullet points, I do tend to, when I'm presenting C-suite, when I've got like a line, I bold the word or two I want them to see, because I think that's what their eyes will gravitate toward. And presenters will say, if you're doing your job, they don't really look at the slides anymore. And slides were created more for the presenter than the audience sometimes. So make sure you try and flip it, because if you're engaging them properly, they do forget about the slides. So does that help?
Thank you. No, I like the idea of putting the message in the header. I never thought about that. I thought that's a great idea.
Christine, it really works, but I have to go back sometimes and go, okay, what? Because it makes you think about the point of the slide. It really does. So what's that bottom line message? So it really does challenge you on the slide of, oh, okay. And at the end, like Chanel says, maybe take a few off, is, before you walk out the door, is go through your deck and say, do I really need all of these? And you'd be surprised once you go back and put the message as the header, you go back and say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of 4 of those slides. So Chanel's right. I have too much on.
Yeah. Less is more, right?
Less is more. Yes. So, but sometimes I have to remind myself, oh, right, Chanel, fine, whatever. I'll do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Give up one of my babies. I spent 5 hours on that slide. And that's the one thing too, you have to let go, because sometimes you get too close to it. You gotta know and let it go. So I apologize. Who else had a question?
Maria, so a question from the chat box. Do you have any specific books that you would recommend on storytelling to help someone learn that skill?
I'm always reading. I don't think any one stands out for me. I think I call them just gems I get from time to time. No one sticks out to me as my all-time favorite of it. Yeah, it doesn't. But let me think. I'll look at my bookshelves and see if one stands out. But nothing comes to mind as my all-time favorite. But I've read a lot of books on it, and and also, of course, taken endless classes on it, as corporate America trains us on. I would say the funniest thing, just digressing, is when I was at BCD, I had taken one of these classes, that they teach you how to do it in your video and this, and they had this thing, and you had to do the point 1, point 2, point 3. You guys, it was my worst presentation ever in my entire life. I look like a robot idiot up there. So just try and balance what the academic side is to making it you. What will always resonate, and what I've learned the most in life is, I have to be me. I can't be what I'm overtrained about. because then the humanized part comes up. But I will look, and I'll send it through to Kim. And then if something resonates out there as far as training.
Thank you. So does anybody else have any questions that they want to take themselves off of mute? I will say there was a recommendation on the chat for the goodmancenter.com/resources. And I believe that's in regards to the storytelling book.
Cool. Any questions in general? I mean, I always call it, open mic. Anything I can answer? Even on data in general, let's face it, data is my passion and my expertise here. Is there any questions I can answer about data?
Hey, Maria, Barry, McCaleb at PwC. Hey, everyone.
Barry.
Speaking of data, I think, everyone is challenged in today's environment because of the lack of data. And I say that based on looking at 2020 data. I know PwC's business is down about 94% globally, where we were pushing 1.7 billion and spend, what we might make, 100 million this year. If that, what are your recommendations, or what are you hearing in the industry? Because there's, of course, there's a lot of chatter as far as we're going to get back to 40%, 20%, but taking the existing data set that companies, whether it be on the buyer side or on the supplier side, how do you make sense of the small amount of data that is there to try to project where you need to focus your efforts moving forward? Because I know for PwC specific, our top U.S. city from a hotel perspective was New York, with about 120,000 room nights. Then London. We know what our top routes are from an airline perspective. But knowing that those volumes have shrunken, because currently in the U.S., all of our offices have remained closed, trying to look at the future, thinking positive that we will get back to some form of travel, but we don't know when, and we don't know how to look at the existing small amount of data. So what would your recommendations be, I guess? And also, what are you hearing in the industry as far as, what is the priority? Is it, I think I hear a lot that it's about the duty of care, more so than saving money, because everyone's saving money. Our spend is down, $1.4 billion. It's not about the money. It's more about the duty of care and doing the right thing for our clients, but also for our employees. I know that Delta, kind of continues to say, and is that people first, people over profits. And I'm hearing chatter in the industry that that's where more corporations are. They're trying to take care of their people, so that then when the guests or customers come back, that they can do that. So that's a lot of stuff out there. I ramble like you. So
I'm a rambler. So Barry, you know that. Okay, so a couple things, and you keep me honest, Barry. Okay, so there's a lot of unknowns now, and predictive, analytics is about a study of the past to predict the future. So, but let's talk about some of the unknowns that are impacting what will happen here. A couple things, the vaccine, we get that. The return to offices are going to do that, and of course, and the return to travel on it. But so things are happening. So when everything's netted out, so let's talk about what's happening in this kind of return to offices. A lot of major companies are saying, oh, they can work from home, so they no longer have to go live in a big New York City. So people are leaving. People are leaving New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco. We've all seen the study. It was interesting when I saw one of the top cities people are moving to, or the Austins of sorts. They're saying, whoa, okay, so I can live anywhere. So it's going to be fascinating, the impact on commercial and residential real estate. And then what happens to travel patterns? Because if you look at somebody who used to go to an office, walk to an office, drive to an office, now they're going to be in a different city. There will still be a presence, a corporate office there, not as large. But so will they then fly there, once a quarter? So there will be those travel pattern changes impact on there. So there'll be travel pattern changes. that'll occur. So that's one thing that you've got to keep looking at. Or what are the, as it continues to come back, what are the travel pattern changes? The other thing to continue to look at in its current state are, so the people that are traveling in COVID, the ones that are, what are the behavioral aspects that are changing? Okay, so let's talk about a couple of those. Is, for example, is will they take less trips but stay longer? So will the demand on the airline side go down and yet the hotels go up because the length of stay increases? Will there be tier shifts in the fact that somebody says, you know what, I feel more comfortable staying at a full service than I used to be at, service. So you got to look at those behavioral aspects that occur because they feel like that keeps them safer, back to that duty of care element of it. Now, other behavioral aspects that to, of course, look at is now based on this whole duty of care, will there be a much bigger shift of compliance management into the aspect of channel compliance, preferred compliance? Will these bad boys of travel, BBTs, shift over, and now all of a sudden where they wouldn't do in channel, especially in your industry, which is notorious for the higher group of bad boys of travel, BBTs, will they start behaving when it comes to compliance management aspect of it? So these are all things, even in its new state, as it comes back, are ones to watch closely, to say, and then to use that to project out of what that then means to the business, to your procurement strategies, to everything else, is to look at all these different data elements and then start saying, okay, now what do I do with that? How do I action that? What does that mean? What does that mean to all these different elements to it? Because it's going to net out to be that there are going to be changes that occur. So how do we go about, monitoring those sprouts of stuff to see how sustainable those are and what the impact to all the different things that you do are. So, and I can go on, Barry, I'm going to ramble to death, but does that kind of give you guys some insights on that? And did that answer your question, Barry? Did I keep everything in there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's one of the biggest challenge that, not only, myself and my company, but I think everyone has, if the truth be told, is, what do you look at? What, you can plan something today, but I think you have to make sure that you have the flexibility built in, because it's going to change by tomorrow because of another lockdown or more restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think having that complete flexibility in everything that we do is probably most critical right now. But again, still trying to look at the data. We can make, comparisons based on the 19 data, which was a really, really good year. Mm-hmm. But is it 20%? Is it 40%? I think it's going to vary based on the type of business that you're in as well. But again, I think your point, the travel patterns, I think that definitely will change, just because of people relocating or not physically having to be on site. So again, trying to kind of come up with what is it going to look like is it's a shot in the sky that I think we're all hoping to be able to kind of capture something.
Yeah, and just keep watching those travel pattern changes, because it could positively or negatively impact it. So, and it's something to watch carefully, as are the other data points, because initially some of the travel patterns and some of the behavioral ones, because of quarantine aspects of it, are not sustainable, because there'll be a point that quarantine's not there. Okay. So you got to watch and say in your data, say that's a blip because of, the aspects around COVID quarantine. But these are what I call long-term sustainable behavioral changes. These are permanent. These are not going away until such time where there's some major disruption, but these have changed permanently. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have another question. So
Sure.
When you present data to a large audience, what format do you actually recommend that resonates best with the group?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you've got all the personalities in there, on there is, I do a hybrid to what I do. If it's pure CEO, then it's so bottom line, it's pure CFO, it's pure numbers. If it's a larger audience, then I go to a hybrid one of it. I balance out. I still make my bullet points pretty short and sweet on there. But I do tend to lean toward a little bit more color into it and a little more storytelling on it. I do err more on that side to make sure I'm not losing them. And I don't make it too much numbers, because then also I'll lose people, because I find either you're a numbers person or you're not. So I have to kind of make it a 50-50 approach to it. So it's hybrid. It really is. And to balance the different personalities.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Hey, Maria, I have one.
Sure.
It's Donna Murley. For this, hey there, for this group, what other, I mean, your topic was just fabulous as far as I was concerned.
Oh, thank you, Donna.
But what other topics do you think this group needs to know about to go forward into this year? We've got Shane Downey speaking on government. Kim's done a great job on getting the different sectors.
Mhm.
Are there any other broad topics or detailed topics you would recommend?
That's a great question. I would say I certainly do just one on data, because it is so important, especially when you talk about, to Barry's question, to the C-suite, to everything else is, I mean, literally to Barry's question, we could have gone 2 hours just on that. I had to give the Reader's Digest version of it. And then in addition to that, I think is managing the complexity of what is now considered safety and security, is just to talk about what it is. Because if you look at that, Donna, it's so different now. Let's say you've got 2 employees. One says, I'm going to travel. One says, I refuse. How do you do that? How do you manage that? Is that considered a safety issue? Is that considered, can you do that? Can you require one to do it and let one say, no, I don't feel safe because of COVID? No. Or can they say, you know what, I can't because, you know what, my kids are being homeschooled now. Can you allow that? And what does it mean? These definitions are changing, out there, and there's so much complexity around that. Is how do you balance all that on there? I would spend a day just on that subject alone, and the complexities. And then how do you then take all of this and operationalize it and still make it efficient and still make it, on there. And the last thing is, I think that how do we continue the innovation and not let COVID take that out? Because one of my greatest fears is our industry is losing amazing talent. They are. We have 2 things that are occurring. One is because of the layoffs and furloughs that are occurring, talent is leaving, and because of the pace of recovery, they're going to go to other industries. And then other industries realize that we're hurting, and they're tapping our people and taking them, So in order to innovate, it's one of the cores is to having the great talent, to make sure that we keep them, make sure that we can recruit them in, and make sure that we don't lose sight of that, because it's going to be critical not only to our recovery, but also just to the ongoing success of the industry. And then I think, also, if I were to put a 4th subject in there, is how do we all come together and help with the pace of recovery? What do we do? How can we all help make a difference on that pace? What are we doing to help that? So, I mean, those are just ones off the top of my head.
No, that's good. It'll give Kim something to work on for the rest of the year. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
And
Well,
thank
thank
Oh,
you
go
guys
ahead,
so
Maria,
much.
please.
I was so honored to be here, and I hope this was helpful. You certainly know, reach out to me anytime if I can ever help at all, but it was an honor to do this. And I hope that you guys walked away. I always call them gems. Sometimes you get diamonds and rubies and pearls, sometimes smoky quartz, and sometimes a rock. But I hope there were gems that you're able to take away and use and apply.
We appreciate the nuggets, as I call them.
Well, good.
Oh, Cindy, I'll go ahead and pick it up from you. Thank you, Cindy, for managing the chat feature and for the managing our Q&A this afternoon. Maria, thank you again for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I personally took a few gems, so I've got lots of notes here, so thank you. To those on the call, Maria's presentation will be posted on our website. We should have that up, I would say, within the next 24 hours, and it's probably going to be up by the end of the day. A few notes before we wrap up. I just wanted to let you know that we have our March and April meetings speakers solidified. We're happy and excited to have Jan Lennon, who is the Assistant General Manager of Public Safety and Security at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. And she's going to speak on, basically she's going to give us an update on how the airport is operating as it relates to COVID, traveler safety, and then just overall airport updates. On April 1st at 11 a.m., we're super excited to have Shane Downey with us. Shane is Vice President of Government and Community Relations, and he will be his topic for his presentation will be Tackling 2021 Head On. Again, that's April 1st at 11 a.m. And then our next meeting will be March 4th at 3 p.m. And again, that's Jan Lennon with the Atlanta Airport. As always, just a reminder to fill out the survey, the post-meeting survey that will be sent out to you. We really appreciate that. Also, our social media platforms, LinkedIn and Facebook, please support those. And I do believe, if I've gotten everything covered, that will be it. And I will give you back about 25 minutes of your day, which I know makes everybody excited. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you joining us today. And again, thank Maria, thank you for your time today. And we look forward to seeing you next month, March 4th, for our next chapter meeting. So thank you very much. Take care.